Definitely a different challenge than anything we've had so far this season. They, on just about every play, there's some sort of shifting, motioning, a lot of movement, a lot of distractions, and it changes week to week. They do a great job of using the personnel that they have. They line up running backs at wide receivers, receivers line up running back, tight ends line up at wide receiver. Everybody lines up everywhere. So it's a game where you have to be very sound in your rules, understand the structure of your defense, and at the same time it still comes down to what it takes to play good defense. I always think that bowl games are one of the first things that bowl games are usually decided by conditioning and tackling. Because there's no other sport where you play week in, week out, and then stop for a month and then resume, in a one-off game. So it'll be important that our guys, are in great condition because they do things with tempo to try and wear you out, and then we got to do a great job of tackling, because you get into a rhythm of that during the course of the season, and you can't be a great defense without being a great tackling team.
I guess y'all got into a rhythm these last 4 months. What's it like when y'all were off 2 weeks and then y'all come back on Friday? What's that like as coaches with your players?
As coaches, we obviously hit the road recruiting, so it's sort of nonstop for us. For the players, they dive right into the final exams. I think in a way, mentally, it's good for everybody to get a break from each other. For sure, physically. Obviously, I think the last half, I think for sure defensively, just sort of being, injuries and just kind of being banged up. It seemed like it caught up with us a little bit there down the stretch. So the chance to get some guys feeling better about their bodies is a big plus. And I think just mentally also just to refresh the guys, get away and then get back and get eager to finish the season on a positive note.
Is there kind of a chip on the guy's shoulders after those last 3 games and things you mentioned, the injuries kind of catching up down?
I think so. Yeah, I think so. I think it definitely puts a sort of a mark on what I felt like was a pretty good season defensively, but ultimately, they measure you after all 12. I think our guys are. I think this football team in general is very motivated for our seniors, certainly for Dak, and for our fans to finish this year, which is again a very good year to finish the year on a positive note.
You spent more time, I think, at North Carolina State than any other coaching staff you've
That's
had.
right.
What memories and things do you have of being with Wolfpack?
I have a lot of great memories of being at NC State. My 2 youngest sons were born in Raleigh. We were there for 6 years, like you mentioned. We were there for the 4 years of Philip Rivers, very similar to the 2 of the years we had with Philip. I think there's a lot in common with Dak's junior and senior year. One of the best years in program history was Philip's junior year. We didn't quite have the same team around him his senior year. Still had a good season, which rings a little bit familiar to me right now with Dak. Very loyal, passionate fan base, which again is reminiscent of what we have here. A place that identifies well with the people of the state of Mississippi, of North Carolina. I think the same way we do here in the state of Mississippi. So. Still have some good friends there. I've got some actually former players that are on the staff there, which is always kind of neat to see. My last game at NC State was in the bowl game in Charlotte, 10 years ago, actually, ironically. Yeah. So it'd be neat to see some familiar faces.
Did North Carolina State kind of shape your mind defensively, being there for 6 years and just kind of learning everything?
Well, we took from Florida State to NC State what we wanted to do defensively. So we were trying to build a defense at NC State. In the same manner that we had the defenses at Florida State. And when you talk about trying to time things up perfectly as a program, we had the year after Philip Rivers graduated, we had the #1 defense in the nation the following year. And we always said if we could have gotten, just sometimes hard to get with recruiting, everything, get everybody timed up, where if we'd had that defense with Philip Rivers, we felt like we could have probably won all of our games with that team. But it's hard to kind of get that at times as you're trying to build a program. So I think on the defense side of the ball, I think there's no doubt that we were always trying to build ourselves from an attack-minded, aggressive defense, similar to what we had at Florida State.
Who were some of those guys? You said that there were players now, assistant or coaches. Do you know who they are?
Yeah, Clayton White coaches their safeties,
okay.
And he was a linebacker. He was a senior linebacker my first year at NC State. And then D'Antonio Burnett he's one of their assistant strength coaches, and he was my middle linebacker for a couple of years there. Both really good guys.
When you saw that it was North Carolina State, what was your first thought?
Yeah, it was just kind of, I hadn't played them since I left, and the first thing I thought about was just some of those guys that I knew there, and just the opportunity to, now it's going to be hard playing them in Charlotte. like I said, when we went there, when we played in that bowl game in Charlotte, it's going to be a very pro Wolfpack crowd. And like I said, their fans do a great job. They make a lot of noise. So it's going to be it's going to be a challenge when you go to North Carolina to play NC State.
From the coordinator standpoint, how much of bowl camp now is addressing any issues from the season that linger or getting ready for, say, 2016?
I think all of the above. I think you've got some time, so you're trying to sort of serve, many masters. On one hand, there's no doubt that we can use these first couple practices to coach next year's team. Be very honest, at some positions we were coaching next year's team this year. With some of the injuries that we had, certainly on the back end. There are things with the older guys that we want to continue to try and improve on. There's some things that, as you step back and you can kind of look under the hood of your performances defensively, of things that we still as a coach, you still think your best performance is out there, and I really do for this defense. I really think that there's still one more performance out of us that's better than what we've shown up to any point this year. So you're still trying to find the way as a coach. It's funny, people don't tend to think of that. They say you kind of at some point you are who you are, but as a coach, you constantly see, the battle for improvement. And I do think we've got a performance in us that will be better than anything we've shown so far this year.
What do you think changed at the end of the season? How easy is that to correct kind of going forward?
Well, I think certainly you have to give credit to some of the teams that we played.
Right.
We played some really good personnel. I think there's no doubt that there were two of the better passing attacks, and I think some of the youth that we had in the secondary. And I don't look at us as being a lot of times, as being in a bad position. I think you just have to the idea of just having to make plays, and what you see in big time games is that guys that are a little bit more experienced just have that that split second ability to be somewhere at that moment, and so I think those are the things. That part of it is just the factors of youth, the factors of our depth. I don't know some of the guys we had up front. Obviously with you see Ryan Brown, what he was dealing with. We were just dealing. We weren't the same version of ourselves. I think one thing that looking back at us defensively, we talked about it all year, the year before's team and all the depth that they had, the experience depth that we had, and we knew people were overlooking us because of the quality of the starters that we were bringing back. We brought back experienced starters.
Right.
The depth was usually our depth was coming from our redshirt freshman class or our freshman class. We think very highly of both those classes. We think we've got an excellent defense in those two classes. I don't know that those guys were all ready for the roles that were asked of them in 2015. And I think in being critical of ourselves, I think some of the guys in that redshirt freshman class. Or even first year players, maybe junior college transfers, the guys that were they ready to step up in November when in reality, with 3 weeks left in the season, we still were in it in the West. So I look at in this day and age, you look at all the snaps that we played. NC State, I think, has they've played the seventh fewest snaps of defense so far this season. So when you look at the amount of snaps that wear down, if you don't have that type of depth, that's why last year's team had such a luxury. That you have to rely on your older guys, and they're playing a lot, and all of a sudden they do tend to wear down. And what you find is you're not as sharp as a blade as you were in November as maybe you were in October.
Is it one of those things where maybe the struggles, the bumps and bruises this year will pay dividends in 16 and 17 because they're ahead of schedule because they got the experience now?
I think so. Yeah, I don't think there's any doubt.
Yeah.
It was when you watch. I sat there and the Egg Bowl was a unique situation for me because I was watching some of the guys that were recruited when I was here the first time around, and when you think about what some of those guys played like, in those type of big rivalry games, experience is paramount. And when you think about what some of those guys that they had, what they looked like in their first Egg Bowl, it's hard now. It's hard duty. So we asked, we put our guys in a situation where they had to get some baptism by fire. We love the guys that we have. And like you mentioned, I think that to me shows optimism for the future.